Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for another edition of the best legal talk show hour you can find on TV. Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, with my co-host, J. Julio Vela, who just had his fourth child.
We're back.
Yeah.
Congrats.
You got another kid, man.
Yeah, man.
Congrats. Congrats.
I was.
How you feel? Tired?
I've had 3.
How many hours of
people,
sleep have you had?
in the last 48 hours?
Yeah.
Like 3.
Yeesh.
I know. I've had at least 3 people today tell me, God, hey, you look so tired.
Well, if you doze off. Yeah, there you go.
We can do this for this.
That's right.
You know,
We can weaken at Bernie's you and just leave those on.
But you know why? Because we got Meredith.
Uh-oh.
Meredith Morse joins us tonight.
On the track. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We're glad to have, we're going to delve into some stuff with you because I do have a little bit of a bone to pick with you on some things, namely your educational choices in life, but that's okay. And of course, the male model himself, fashion icon, sex robot lawyer expert, Steve Shellist.
When do I get the money you promised for me to come on the show?
It's in unmarked bills sitting right outside
Has
the door.
anyone ever told you you look like Tony Stark?
Several clients.
Once or twice?
Yeah.
Where does he keep his Iron Man suit?
I'm really the 1990s Robert Downey Jr. What was the one where he was all coked out and Less Than Zero? Was that what it was called?
I think so, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's really where I prefer to be compared to
I mean, that's where you want
the
to be.
actor.
I will say that 2018 was an amazing year for you. It seemed like almost every couple months on some of the most horrendous cases you were getting big wins and big verdicts.
Thank you.
It's true. There was there was some discussion on the board for you being the top lawyer of the year and getting all the things. No, I'm being serious though.
$10 seems a little low, Steve.
I thought it was 100.
But yes. No, but I'm being serious though. 2018 was a huge year for you. You had some really big verdicts, some really good cases, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's good to have both of you on the show.
Appreciate it.
Because we know who
I'm going to come back more often.
We know who the brains behind the operation is at the Shellist Peoples McAllister firm.
I'm going to call McAllister.
Thank you. Oh, Meredith. It is darn sure not McAllister.
We call her
Call
Jenny
McAllister.
Davis, and she's more of a team captain.
There you go.
She's captain of the
Sean brings a hair gel.
You know, him and I talk occasionally about it.
You swap product.
You do not have him. He's got more product.
I'm surprised there's enough.
I wish he would do it like you. You got. I mean, you got almost the pompadour.
He's got the volume going.
He's got the volume. Sean could do that and get away with it because he's got nice thick head of hair.
Yeah.
As do you. I'm getting a little thin up here. You can't tell. Oh, trust me. Trust me. Trust me.
But
Propecia.
I have never seen
You're
anybody
all
with a
that.
better coat than you.
That's right.
Wow.
So nice.
Guys.
Compliments are coming.
I hope nothing bad. I hope
gonna
Murray
run out.
Newman doesn't call in and
You're gonna run out of
spoil
money tonight, right?
spoil this.
I don't know. We'll see. We're going to be here with you for the next, over the next hour.
Do you think we can really keep up the compliments for that long?
I don't think so.
It's not.
It's not possible.
You can do it.
But,
There's a lot to choose from.
A law.
A lot, yeah. We'll be talking with Steve and Meredith about some legal issues, one of the hot topics going on here in the city of Houston this week. And if you want to join in the conversation, we'll have the phone lines opened up. 713-807-1794 is the number. You can also hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. So let's just get right into it, guys. I mean, the news all this week is talking about the Jasmine Barnes murder case. Obviously, it's a tragic drive-by shooting of a 7-year-old girl inside the car. She was with her sisters and her mother. They were also injured in the drive-by. Right after the shooting happens, a sketch is released of the suspect. It's initially a white male in a red pickup truck, and Sheila Jackson Lee and others, Sean King, the journalist, come out and say this is a racially motivated hate killing. by a white supremacist, and all hell breaks loose from there. And then next thing you know, 2 young black men are arrested for the murder. First one is, I believe, he at least confessed that he was, I believe, the driver in the car, and told them who the shooter was. I mean, there's so many issues here on top of the tragedy of having a 7-year-old girl shot and killed. I mean, I just want to begin kind of with the suspect identification and sketches and the media reaction at first, before we start to peel back the other layers of the onion on this thing in the investigation. But I mean, to me, how do you get to, this is a white male driving a red pickup truck, sole shooter, sole driver and shooter, and then all of a sudden it's 2 young black males? How does that happen, Steve? You're a former prosecutor.
Well, it
you were
depends.
involved with law
That's right.
enforcement.
It depends who you ask. I mean, if you talk to Sheriff Gonzalez, he just says it was a mistake. It was a mistaken identity. It was the shock of the moment. I think that was how they were trying to justify this. No doubt witnesses get it wrong all the time, but that's really wrong.
But
Yeah,
do witnesses get it wrong all the time?
Yes.
If someone put a gun in my face, I'd like to think I could remember what they look like.
I think the trauma of the moment precludes you from really forming a reliable memory. I think that's what a lot of the issues with eyewitness identification. That's where
I would agree with that, and so I have some stories that I'll share of real life misidentifications that happened in a couple cases for very different reasons. But if we are just for a moment, if we're talking about this case, she says, or the witnesses claim, and I pulled one of the articles, again assuming that it's accurate, but when ABC spoke to the mother from the hospital, she said, I believe that it was intentional, and then she described more about the moments after it was fired. And she says, as I turned around and looked back at the street, I heard shots firing, and they came through my window, broke my glass, and hit me in my arm. They sped off in front of us, and then the truck slowed down and continued to fire as he was in front of us. It was not fair. It was not fair. He intentionally killed my child for no reason. So she's talking about a truck. She's focusing on it. It's pulling forward. It's backing up. It pulls next to me. And it sounds here like she's watching it fire at them. And then they go on to describe in such great detail the face of a man, and to the point where they draw a sketch of the man, and it is not at all who was shooting. So, I mean, something's going on here, and again, the focus is the child, no doubt. And so I don't want to detract from that. But since we're talking about the topic, what if they had not beefed up the reward to the point where they got the other tips yet, and they actually found this white male?
That's my point. What if they had actually found the red pickup? Because remember, there was a video surveillance camera released of what they thought the suspect's car was.
NASA enhanced.
Right. And yeah.
You know what happened. He gets arrested.
Yeah.
He gets charged, probable cause, no problem, because eyewitnesses have identified him. He goes to court. He may be held at no bond for a capital murder. Maybe he gets a bond, but probably sits in jail. And then a trial, he says, I didn't do it at all. And they say, whatever. We have a sketch. Multiple people, presumably in a car, identified you up close. And he goes to trial, and they take the stand, and they show the pictures of the child, and the jury is inflamed, and certainly they would think that they have no motive to misidentify, and he may get the death penalty.
And not only that, but you've got Sheila Jackson Lee, a community leader. I know some people will debate that, whether she is or not, despite her elected official status of whether she actually leads in this community or not. She comes out and wants to make this a racial issue. Sean King, the journalist who has been time and time again wrong on racial issues, he's wrong on this one. And those people, can you imagine? What would the pressure have been on the Ogg administration if that guy had been found to rush in and get an indictment?
And do you think they would have rushed in and then gotten an indictment? based on prior.
Do you think it would have been
rushing
different? Do you think it would have been different if Devin?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
I mean, do you think it would have been different from different administrations? I mean, there's no doubt that when those politicians started saying this is racially motivated,
Yes.
the pressure that was. Do you think it would have been different from prior administration? Do you think OG handled this correctly?
I don't know. I mean, thankfully, the district attorney's office, I don't think, really had too much to do at that point, because it very quickly became evident, fortunately through the law enforcement investigation. But I mean, like you're saying, Steve, what if they had found that guy?
You mentioned the journalists, you mentioned community leaders. Is
Yeah.
anybody else at least bemused by the role of social media in this investigation?
I agree. I mean, that, and look, they all serve to fan the flames of this stuff. We've already got kind of a powder keg in this country as it is when it comes to race relations, right? So, you know, look at what happened with the with several other cases. What was it? The Dennys Case. I mean, that was. There was racial overtones in that case.
In the Dennys case, every non-white was rooting for conviction.
Right.
It was throughout the courthouse. I mean, it really was. I mean, I'd go through and I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on? Oh, I hope he goes down." Right. Every white was, "Oh no, well, it's a not guilty. It's not a murder." These racial tensions are very palpable and real.
Yeah, they are.
They are very real. So let me ask you this: how does the attorney, or how have y'all experienced, or anyone, I mean, dealing with this type of media and this type of hype on such a nationally recognized case? How do you deal with that? I mean, you've had a number of pretty high-profile cases. How do you deal with the media in these kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Dennys case was interesting because the first time around he was almost acquitted.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody said, well, he can't get a fair trial in Harris County, and everything was, you know, everyone's crazy about it in the audience. It was a packed courtroom, and the jury almost walked him. I think once you get 12 in the box, I believe you're pretty much somewhat safe, meaning I've tried a lot of cases, and juries don't always go my way, but they usually get it right. They really do. And, you know, they usually can block out what's going on and try to get it right. But everything leading up to it is a circus. Mm-hmm. I don't think the DA's office did anything in this particular case that was wrong, but I just don't understand why law enforcement didn't come out and say, look, we have a person of interest.
Right.
That's different, right? This guy, this little activist, I don't know what his name is, the kind of short guy. He was on the Isaiah Factor with the lawyer. I don't know what the activist's name is.
Yeah, I can't.
This guy, he was the one banging his fists on the table, and this is, you know, racially motivated, and this is a hate crime, and so Isaiah tried to kind of corner him on it and say, well, what do you think now? And he would not apologize. He wouldn't back down. It was all these excuses and things. But I mean, it's just the society we live in now. And everyone, law enforcement is under pressure, I guess, to solve these things quickly. But at what cost? What would it have hurt? You know?
Well, but going back to your point about social media, Meredith, and the role it played, doesn't that tie into the pressure on law enforcement and the DA's office to solve these quickly? Because we live in a world where it's, you know, you get instant gratification. You have instant recognition, or something is instantly out there.
It ties to both the pressure that's put on law enforcement and the district attorney's office to solve it, and it also contributes to kind of the static of misinformation that law enforcement's dealing with when they're trying to investigate. There's a lot of people attempting their own sort of vigilante endeavors on identifying this person. Especially when you incentivize some sort of tip, it's going to take law enforcement longer to wade through that. Now, I mean, it's both a benefit and a burden, I suppose.
Let me ask you this: how do you reconcile the witness identification to the arrest? How does one do that?
Well, what do you mean? The fact that they ended up arresting someone completely different?
Yes.
Well, let me just say one thing before we move past the topic. I'll play devil's advocate for a moment. And I'm not a fan of the way this played out and how the misidentification and all that, but in a weird way, the silver lining is because of the hyperbole, because of the racial overtones and the fanfare and the craziness, they raised $100,000 worth of money to give out in rewards, et cetera, which may have led to the tips that led to potentially the correct killers. And I'm not going to even agree right now that those two necessarily are the correct killers, because I'm a defense attorney. Let's see how that plays out. And my
Got
God,
my theories on that too.
the new lawyer, who's the lawyer for the new guy? Is it Lisa Andrews,
Lisa
I think?
Andrews, yeah.
I mean, I was waiting for someone to come in and go, I didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
Because some white guy did it.
Well, not only that, not only that, but even the confession. Let's just assume that they better hope that confession is airtight. One, but
On the first guy?
on the first guy.
Yeah.
But what if the first guy is? I mean, look, maybe it's not him, but maybe his lawyer correctly recognized, like, hey, dude, your way to avoid a capital murder conviction may be to cooperate and dump somebody else in the grease.
Don't be the trigger man.
Yeah, don't be the trigger man, kind of thing. And if you know, I mean, hey, that could happen.
If I'm Lisa Andrews,
I'm muddying the water on
I
that.
set this thing for trial, and I
Yes.
go in and I blame the first guy, and then I pull up the sketch and I say, what? They looked out the window. They saw the shooter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is not an easy case
No.
for the prosecution. This is extremely. This is like. I mean, I don't know how you get the toothpaste back in the tube on this one.
Right,
So,
Steve, the statement that you read earlier on the show, that is a pretty unambiguous statement of events.
right.
That nails them to a narrative.
Yeah.
I don't see how you get around that, not with the men that have been charged. It's going to be interesting to watch unfold.
How do you have any of y'all had a case where there's a confession that we know it's absolutely bogus?
So, glad you asked. 2 cases, and I'll try not to run the whole show with this.
Run the show.
But
We
it
got
is-
some.
But I mean, run timeout. But this is fascinating to me. So, first case, both are capital murders. First case, actually both cases I'm with Christian Capitan, my former law partner, on. Excellent trial attorney. Guy goes out with a friend on a string of robberies, ag robberies, and they jack about 9 or 10 people, and it ends up with the 10th person. They go out and he runs or struggles, and they shoot and kill him. My client is about 4'11", 350 pounds. Okay, I won't mention a name here, but let's just assume for a minute that he was the shooter. They drag into court all the extraneous witnesses on all the ag robs, and one by one they get up. And let's just say I know for sure that hypothetically this 4'11", 350-pound guy is the guy that always gets out of the car and always points the gun at the victims. In comes a guy, college kid, something, in one of the guys in his car. My guy goes up, allegedly, points a gun at him, 4'11", 350 pounds. The guy gets on the stand, and the prosecutor says, can you please describe the person who held the gun to you? Yes, ma'am. About 6'2", 6'3", thin build. Now, I'm looking at Christian and going, the guy's 4'11", what? The point was, oh my God, for once I knew what the real truth was, but over here, the witness is actually helping us, but he is so far off. And there were 2 or 3 other witnesses that did that. Now, again, that goes back to what Meredith said with the shock of the moment, etc. That was one case. Okay, that was a hung jury. Why? Because we argued that he wasn't the guy. It was other case. Didn't go to trial, but you have this is more tied in with the current case. You have a couple and their son. And this was back in the 90s. This was a cold case that we inherited later on. In the apartment, the door gets kicked in walk a bunch of masked men. They tie up the husband, beat him up. They rape the mother. And one of them takes their masks off, and the 8-year-old boy sees it, so they kidnap the boy. And about a month or 2 later, and the police go and question the parents. We want to find your boy. What happened? We don't know. They came in, they did this. Who are they? We don't know. Well, it's just, who does this? Are you into drugs? No. Are you into something else? No. Do you owe someone money? No. A couple months, they don't find the boy. A couple months later, bones wash up on the shore of some water, a lake or a pond in Baytown. And turns out to be the 8-year-old boy. Case goes unsolved. 20 years later, DNA, they find our client in Puerto Rico on another murder charge, and they bring him in because there was some DNA that was left in the house. Turns out the story was he was their drug supplier. Okay? And they knew who he was, but they didn't want to implicate themselves.
Right.
And their child was gone and missing. Now, would they have caught the child, gotten the child, and saved the child's life? Perhaps not. But it just goes to tell you that sometimes a witness will intentionally misidentify. I'm not suggesting that's what happened here, but I've experienced that personally, and I've experienced misidentification, shall I say, unintentionally.
Do y'all know anything
I
about?
was once misidentified as the defendant when I was second chairing a case.
Did you?
That happened with
was.
you as well. Do you remember? That happened with
You
Shellist.
misidentified.
Huh? Yeah, the witness got up there and said I was the defendant.
Well,
What type of case was this?
I forget.
no. I have a couple things I can think of.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it really was. You can check it out. I don't have a criminal background.
Isn't that funny?
So, well, let me ask you this. Okay, let's talk about witness identification. For the individuals that were arrested in this current case that's going on, did the witnesses provide a lineup? Were they pointed? Do you know if they pointed out some? Obviously, I guess they didn't, because they would have pointed out a white guy with a hoodie and such, but they didn't. But we do know that throughout the state of Texas that there's recommendations, my understanding, but not a standard procedure throughout that says how a lineup should be governed. Do you know anything about that?
Well, they can't do a lineup here. It would kill their case.
Sure.
What are they going to do? March two African-American males into this lineup or photo spread and say, are these the guys? Yeah, those are. Well, what happened with the white? That's what I'm saying. This is going to be a case based solely on the confession. They found a gun that had some shell casings that might have matched. So they may be able to make the case at least on, I think they found the gun in Black's apartment, not in the new guy, whatever his name is, that was found. So they may be able to make the case, but they're not going to do a lineup.
Have the eyewitnesses recanted? Has there been any explanation on the ground for how they got that so wrong?
No.
I think the only thing that you can rely on is that it would be a traumatic event for anyone, but especially to be so emotionally adjacent to the decedent.
Yeah, but like you said, it's so hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, how do you do that at this point? I mean, if you're the prosecutors and you put them up on the stand, how do you can't undo that statement?
You know what they're going to do. They're gonna do the only thing they can do, and I think Berg or somebody was on the news or someone was talking about it. The only thing they can do is get up there and go, it was shocking. They'll backpedal. It was shocking. They'll woodshed their witnesses and say, Joe, and help them. Are you sure that's what you saw? What I hope. Let's be fair though. None of us have seen or listened to the witness statements. We're relying upon what the media has written and what Gonzalez has put out via.
Well, no, I do believe she gave at least one interview to one of the television stations while she was in the hospital.
And that's the one that I think I read, but I didn't hear it. But if that is in fact what she said, and then I'm not sure who was contributing to the drawing. I don't know if that was the mother, the daughter, or the mother and the other kids in the car. But whatever it is, I mean, the state's going to just say it was shocking, it was stressful, and so she misidentified, but it doesn't matter. We apologize. We got it wrong.
It passes the storyboard logic a little bit better. The initial narrative is it's a racially motivated execution-style killing, but why? Why would this man with complete attenuation to this victim, why would he do that? It makes more sense logically if it was just like a drive-by shooting gone wrong, some sort of gang-related mishap, don't you think? Isn't one story a bigger pill to swallow for an audience, for a jury?
Which do you think is a bigger pill?
Yeah.
The first.
And why?
The first, because it's a less common narrative. It's something that we haven't been fed. And this kind of shores itself up with the issue with eyewitness identification. People will initially construct this story model in their minds. They'll cleave to that before they'll cleave to the truth. Any information coming in that's going to contest the story that they've initially built, they're not going to pay attention to that. And it's been psychologically demonstrated.
Sure.
Learned about it in law school.
Bennett talks about it a lot.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And it's not intentional. It might not even be on a conscious level. It's part of that's the part of the Achilles heel. We used to think that the eyewitness identification was the golden standard, and now look at death penalty litigation, look at actual innocence exoneration. We're learning that it's not the tool that we think it is. And like Steve said, the state's attorneys have no case but to woodshed their eyewitnesses. It's like, oh, now what do? We better hope that, like you said, it's an airtight confession.
But if I'm the defense attorney, if someone drives by, and let's just say they throw a bottle at my car, they shoot at my car, whatever it is, and I say, and I look over and I get it, and I just say, look, someone drove by, and I think the last person I saw was an African-American person or a white person or whatever it is. But to go through the detail and say, no, I can describe their face, I can describe their eyes, that tells me that I looked at the shooter, and the shooter was white, and the shooter had blue eyes. So how then do you get up on the stand and just say, no, it was the shock of the moment. I get the psychology behind it, but there is a point where it's too far, right? If a car drives by and you say, I thought it was an airplane, right? No, it was a car.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to make this a racial issue. I'm saying I don't think it is at all, but something weird is going on, and I can't back this up with anything, and I'm not trying to spread rumors or gossip.
You heard it here first.
I heard something or read something that perhaps there might have been some connection between, and I can't substantiate this, between the mother of the child and one of the shooters. And someone.
Sure.
Yeah, I read
like
that.
I said, that narrative.
How do you reconcile that with the confession? I mean, I'm a big. How do you do that?
Well, you go back to the case that I talked about before, and again, I have nothing to back this up, but I'm just saying in the case I had before where the parents intentionally put police on a different path because they didn't want them on a certain path, that would be one way. And so my experiences in the courthouse have led me to be a little cynical about this, and so that's why I'm looking at this in kind of a conspiracy way, that they were intentionally sending the cops on a different path. But I don't know this mother, and I don't want to suggest that she did that.
Well, no, and I think the guy who confessed, he said they were actually out to commit a hit on somebody, but that turned out to be the wrong car.
Okay.
That they were actually looking for another car. It turned out they were the wrong car, and they didn't realize it till the next day when the whole story hit the news. So, I don't know. I mean,
What's a hit go for these days? I'm kidding, but I mean that's just so insane. It's Gotham City out there, y'all. Like, be careful.
By the way, who was, Genius Number One's lawyer that said, I know there's a tip, and I know that they've already identified a white male with blue eyes and a red pickup truck, but go ahead and walk yourself in, or go ahead and explain and confess to this. What in the heck was he doing?
How did they get? How did they come upon the first suspect they arrested? Do we know?
A tip?
There was a tip, and I also I think I understand too. And look, there's been a lot of misinformation and everything on this whole case, obviously, but I think I understand as well that the ATF was involved, as you might have alluded to before. They had some ballistics, and it may have been traced back to a firearm used in another crime, and that's how they got to the initial suspect.
I thought they found the gun. I thought I read that they had found the gun in his apartment or something, in the car or something.
They may have, but like you remember when we did the episode with the crime lab? I mean, some of the stuff that they can do now with tracing firearms and linking firearms to people and the firearm database, it's pretty incredible. So, you think about the patterns that come out of a specific gun onto a bullet. If they can trace those patterns and link it back, I mean,
Sure. It's like fingerprint analysis for firearms.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, that may be how it's done. I mean, what always concerns me here is just the rush to judgment by the media. and the fans, the flames being fanned by social media, by, politicians and all this, and let's set this case aside because we've kind of beat it to death, but I mean, this is happening so much more in other cases. The Dennys case. They pick up, there's so many things that happen these days that the media just extracts everything out and they put everything out there. I mean, I feel like it's very difficult now to get a fair trial in this country because of the oversaturation you get from 24-hour media cycle, social media, everything these days, that it's impossible for people to get a fair trial now.
Well, like last week, there was another child that was shot. Thank God they'd lived. But it was like a black-on-black crime, so it wasn't a big deal.
What, did you hear about the father that stabbed his 3 kids with a screwdriver?
Yeah.
That got about 10 minutes.
Or what about the two young girls, 12 and 14-year-old girls who killed their mother?
Because they took their cell phone away?
Right.
Yeah. Let me tell you what I think it is. If they didn't have that video footage of the red pickup truck going by,
right,
and maybe if they didn't have this drawing, they don't have those in every case, this may not have gotten the attention. The news loves, the media, they love videos. They're a lot more interested if you can turn over to them photos or videos or something that they can show on the news other than just somebody talking.
And you know why? Because that becomes a shareable internet commodity. And they get shares, they get likes, they get activity on their webpage. And there is no walking back from that. Right. We've crossed that Rubicon.
But in this case, right, you're absolutely right. But in this case, you had it even further. I mean, you have a 7-year-old girl being shot to death, and then you have DeAndre Hopkins,
sure,
Pro Bowl wide receiver, maybe the best wide receiver in the league, coming out and saying, "I'm going to donate my playoff game check to helping solve this." So we've.
It worked.
It did.
I think,
if you call that working,
right?
Well, I mean, and they wouldn't have arrested some black dudes. You think he would have done that before he thought it was going to be some black dudes getting arrested?
I don't know. I think they probably, at least with suspect number 1, got the right guy. And the only reason I say that is, I mean, in my experience, this guy went in, he confessed to a pretty big crime and did all that. And again, I may be wrong, but hopefully they've solved it and they've got the right person. So all's well that ended well. Right. But it could have gone much differently.
Could have.
If they had arrested someone else.
Right.
And I point out too that I either Facebooked on this or put on my LinkedIn or something. But I mean, this misidentification thing, believe me, it hurts the African American males much more.
Oh, for sure.
You know how many guys are in prison that were probably misidentified? Oh, it was that guy. I picked him out. I've seen that happen way more. So it is a problem. And, the thing that I think we need to take away from this is not to take anything away from the little girl that died and her family, and thank God, and hopefully they get some closure on this, but it is that the public that ends up on juries understand that witness identification is not 100% what happened. It is merely another piece to the puzzle, and quite frankly, it may be less reliable than a lot of the other pieces. That's what I kind of hope the takeaway from this is.
Yeah.
What comes into play for witness misidentification and false confessions? I mean, what are some things that? Because I look back, I think to myself, I say, look, if I think that's the guy that did it. And if I'm someone being accused of something, I'm going to confess to something. I can't think of any rational or logical or any sort of scenario that I'm going to confess to some sort of heinous crime. Well, how and why does that happen?
And I want you to talk on that, because not to say we're old fogies on here, but you've been in law school more recently than, for sure, Steve and I.
Come on.
But I'm interested because they really didn't the focus, the psychology behind false confessions and eyewitness identification. I think that has really been exponentially developed within the last 10 years. I think, and you were talking about you learned about it in law school. I mean, we kind of vaguely talked about it and kind of did some examples in law school, you know, and the professor would have somebody come in, scream at him, throw a book, and, you know, then run out of the room, and he'd ask, okay, I want you to describe the person that just did that, and everybody got it wrong, kind of thing. But we never got into the psychology behind that.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, you know, you had mentioned it, I'm curious as to what they're teaching in law school these days about the psychology behind it.
So my experience from it, it came from a lot of different classes actually. Criminal law, where you'd expect trial advocacy, again, where you'd expect constitutional law, where oftentimes conversation would run abreast of really interesting issues percolating up, but especially in the rules of evidence. And I think the reason why is the underpinning of so much of that logic, like you said, behind the law of evidence is trustworthiness, is
Reliability.
Is this, right, is this reliable? Eyewitness identification, we are seeing it's becoming increasingly and increasingly unreliable. And it's for anecdotes like you just mentioned. This is not, it's oftentimes not anyone doing it intentionally or on a conscious level. But I think that as it's becoming a bigger issue that science is becoming aware of, it can't help but trickle over into the law as well. And we've seen, I mean, there's been a huge death penalty abolitionist push that kind of tracks the development of the understanding that eyewitness identification is not the golden standard that it was once thought to be. I mean, Harris County is certainly topping the charts at actual innocence exonerations from death row. How many of those have been predicated on eyewitness identification? And like Steve mentioned earlier, how many of the recipients of that unfortunate, inexact science were minorities?
What would you say are some factors that come into play for misidentification of witnesses? And additionally, what are some things that are some factors that you would think that would come into play or that you'd attack as a lawyer for giving a false confession?
I want to talk about false confession.
Okay, let's
because
do
the
that.
entire time that it's been on the table, there's one of my favorite books, East of Eden, kind of contemplates this. There's a character in East of Eden who, her body goes missing, and her parents are found murdered in this tragic house fire, right? And her body goes missing in the whole town. It's a small town, and they're all worried. Well, at first it's, oh, could it be you? Could it be you? And when there's no motive uncovered there, then they start looking outside of smaller town circles. And at length, this what's described as a bumbling halfwit is brought in for questioning. And this man, JV, you mentioned earlier, why would like a logical, like procedural mind, why would somebody give a false confession? Why would somebody confess to something that didn't happen? Sometimes you can be led into it. You can't always assume that somebody's mind is logical or that someone's mind is operating even at the same level.
Sure.
These police officers are not just taught, they're encouraged to lie and to coerce. And we are taught from a very young age, if you're a child, what happens if you're separated from your parents? Go find a police officer. Go trust the cops. If you're in trouble, tell the truth will set you free. In this story in East of Eden, this small chunk of the narrative, it goes on to say that this bumbling halfwit was then delighted when he was indicted by a stern and frightened grand jury. At last, he thought that he had done something with himself. And the passage goes on to elaborate that the judge who presided at the examination before the plea was a man who was so good and pure that he canceled out a lot of wickedness with his life. And the judge revealed that without the proper prompting that this so-called culprit was used to, he couldn't remember whom he had killed, or why, or how, or any attendant detail. So the judge sighed, and he looked at the constable, and he said, "You shouldn't have done a thing like that. The law was designed to save, not to destroy." And we're seeing that a lot with actual innocence exoneration. I think it speaks to false confessions, and I think it speaks to the danger of improper eyewitness identification, which, as Steve pointed out, is becoming kind of an aggressive issue in these sorts of cases.
I mean, isn't part of false confessions too just the suspect wants the interrogation to end?
Sure.
Wow.
They want it to be over with.
Let me satisfy you.
I mean,
here it is. Let's
look,
take care of it.
how many times have you been in a relationship where you want to end the interrogation and you'll confess to whatever if it stops the inquisition?
And first, let me say that's why I hired Meredith. because of what you just heard. For the last, I couldn't have said it that well. But not to keep harping on capital murders, but another capital murder that Christian and I were involved with, we argued, all we had was the confession. And we argued that it was a coerced confession. And the jury was out a long time, but ultimately they didn't buy it. But I will tell you what I learned from that particular case. I don't think juries buy that very often. Like you were saying, come on, if you confess, you confess. And I think that's certainly what 99% of the jurors out there will never believe anything differently. But to Meredith's point, I think it happens a lot more often. Police don't just go in and start the tape and say, okay, let's talk now. This shit starts long before when they're in the police car and they're in the hallway and you don't get those tapes. So when this person has been there for 8 hours and all the threats have been made or all the promises have been made and you're now getting the confession. So we know it happens. The problem is people don't like to believe it happens. But I think Meredith is right. You and I might not do it, but we may not all be average suspects out there.
Sure.
And so I think it happens a lot more than we think it happens.
Well, we've had some individuals, some law enforcement come on the show and talk, or law enforcement, current or past, talk about the Reed method, where, you know, they're actually taught to lie. They're taught to have triggers.
There's no rules that law
Right.
enforcement has to follow
No,
when
right.
interrogating people. I mean, that's the misconception, is that people, like you said, trust the police. We're here to help you.
Right.
And we've kind of gotten away from that.
You have to tell
right?
me if you're a cop, man.
Effing
Yeah.
cops, man.
So
They
here's-
don't.
Here's what they can't do. There are rules. They're very limited. Obviously,
They can't waterboard you.
They can't get physical, right? And interestingly, they are allowed to lie, as we all know, but they're not allowed to make faulty promises. So they can't say, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, we'll make sure you get a probation. So they're not allowed to make promises, but they're allowed to lie. It's a very strange setup.
A lot of times I think that, you know, I have a real big problem with law enforcement interaction with juveniles because, you know, they're allowed to lie. Displays of firearms and weapons in juvenile proceedings can cause a juvenile and even a full-grown man, adult, to say or to comply with certain things.
Okay.
But they have to be videotaped, I believe, don't they?
On
Yeah.
they have to have certain warnings that are required. You know, and we're talking about, you know, the parents not wanting to I guess reveal that they might have been involved in things that they shouldn't have been speaking. It's this one where I guess the parents were professional athletes and the son is accused of shooting them, but apparently there might have been some sort of sex ring that was going on. You know this. It's all
Classic.
It
Tale
was
as old as
about-
time.
It's been all over the news.
It happened about a block from my house.
That's a fact. I think is it Rick DeToto has a case or
It is Rick's. I think Rick represents a juvenile.
He does.
God, it's such a fascinating case. He's being tried as an adult now, from what I understand. I think that's where we're at. I don't know. But God,
I mean, are you guys fine? I feel like it's getting tougher these days to handle criminal cases because of the way social media is, because of the way the news reacts to things. I think what we see, I mean, look, you have an entire segment of Twitter that is just dedicated to non-lawyers giving legal advice, you know, and Facebook the same thing. And I feel like there's just so much misinformation out there that it's created it's created amongst people who get into either as jurors or defendants, it's created, you know, misunderstandings coming into the process, preconceived notions about how things should work. And so a lot of them a lot of people I think who come into jury duty may not necessarily agree with the jury instructions they get. And then I think there's a lot of people who get caught up in the system, defendants, who have now unrealistic expectations heading into it of how the case is going to proceed or what. And I'll give the perfect example. Let's look at the special counsel's investigation of what's going on up in Washington and how those deals are being given out and what's happening in those cases and how people are getting 6 months or 30 days on these major federal cases that the media is covering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and saying it's treason. These are crimes against the country. And these people are going to jail for 10 days? And I come back here to our little part of the country,
Yeah.
and, you know, my clients are like, why can't I get that deal? Why can't I get the 10-day deal? I didn't commit treason against the country. I didn't sell secrets to the Russians. I didn't give intel to these guys, but they want to put me away for a decade. I mean, it's creating the media's, you know, the way they're portraying the justice system and covering this with just, I think, sets up such an unrealistic portrayal. We've talked about how TV does it with Law and Order and Boston Legal and everything, but now it's bleeding over into what should be the news, the people who should report the facts.
Unrealistic expectations used to be set often in holdover cells, and now
Right.
it's happening on internet message boards.
How y'all have a number of, you run a high-profile firm with cases in the news and the media and profile stuff. How do you have? How are you dealing with these kind of things? I mean, you just had recently the bus driver.
Yeah.
That was all over the news.
You just have to fight back. I think the current administration, you know, and I'm one to talk because I've been on, you know, I don't necessarily shy away when the news calls me and wants to ask me stuff. I don't normally shy away, but I'm not a public servant. This particular administration seems to enjoy being on the news, and there's people with rocket players and there's people with football, but they love that limelight. That worries me a lot. So all we can do is fight back. But I'm going to say this again. I alluded to it before. I get it, and I think it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you get into the ring, and by that I mean the jury trial,
Sure.
I still have faith. I truly believe that when you get 12 people in the box, and you get the judge, and you get the lawyers, and you block out everything else, and you can connect with those jurors, you know, assuming you're somewhat decent of a litigator and you're a trial lawyer, and you got a good judge and you got a good prosecutor, that you can shake all that other bullshit away and you can get to what you're supposed to be there for. I truly believe that no matter how ugly things get on the outside, you can still shut the doors, turn, you know, figuratively, shut the doors, drown the noise out, and try the case. I believe that, and maybe I'm naive.
You don't think that a panel has been impermissibly polluted?
I just think, I mean, again, I keep saying this, but again, I'm not good at anything. I don't play golf well, I don't play basketball, I can't work on cars. There's so little I can do, but I feel like I can talk to juries and I can try a case. That's it. But yes, when you're in there, the jurors, you can get them to say, come on. I mean, look at the first Dennys case.
No,
there was more media attention on that than almost anything else in the history of Harris County,
Right.
and they almost walked this guy. How did that happen?
Well, again, I wonder if they almost walked him because of the attention. I mean, it could cut both ways. Again, you're talking about, look at the makeup of the jury, you know? So the media attention could have affected different people different ways.
Maybe you're right.
You know, I mean, I fear that there's going to be, that we're going to get to a point that communicating with jurors is going to be very difficult. And that we're going to have a very, very, very hard time.
How so?
Well, I mean, I think that, again, we are so used to now living in a world where we're on these devices
Right.
24/7. You know? I mean, when you're not doing something, what's the first thing you do?
Check the phone, check Facebook, Instagram.
That's the first thing you do.
I don't have an account on either of them. So
I mean,
I don't know.
if you're sitting somewhere, if you're sitting, you know, watching a speech even, I mean, there's moments where it becomes like, oh, this is boring, I'm gonna check out here. I mean, we all do it now. It's like a reaction. Oh, we think
Cliff's the only
phone
one with a
does.
screen in front of him
Correct.
at the table right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
But I think what you're saying, what you're alluding to is the new generation of jurors. Right? So these kids that are going to be jurors in the future, the ones that truly are the iPhone, iPad generation, then we may see a very different circumstance unfold. But I still think we're in a place right now when you get these 30, 40, 50-year-olds on the juries where...
See, I'm more concerned about those guys.
Really?
Yes.
They're not immune to the social media craze. They're not immune to the that beautiful glow of the
But they
smartphone.
still grew up reading books. They grew up with phones without cords. I think that they can still, you know, again, it's getting harder, but they're still in that moment.
I agree with you, but I mean, look, yes, I remember using a rotary phone. I remember using a phone where you had to have a cord that stretched, 20 feet so you could take the one phone that was in the kitchen and walk around the corner to try and talk to people. But literally it feels, given the way technology has progressed, that feels like that we were still riding around in steam carriages.
But Shellist, you changed my mind. Because at first I was on Camp Jimmy. I'm thinking, no, they're godforsaken, every last one of them. But I think there's something innate to people, humanity, I don't know. We want to hear stories. At the end of the day, we want to be fed a good narrative. And I think that people are maybe so unaccustomed to a good oral storyteller. We're so used to screens that if, like you said, you shut the doors and pull the blinds and clear out all the static, maybe jurors would be almost more receptive to a talented storyteller.
Do you guys use PowerPoints?
I use PowerPoint.
I don't.
I use PowerPoint,
I used to.
I don't list words. My PowerPoints are primarily photos. Or
Yeah,
pictures
if I
and
do
images.
use one, it's images.
All right, and I've seen you. I saw you in a federal trial where your PowerPoint was 90% images.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been where I took it from. That I thought that it was very effective. It wasn't like I'm going to read from the PowerPoint. I'm just going to display an image and go from there.
I don't do it unless it's, I don't use them unless it's just images, unless I can weave the story around the images. I don't want people reading what's on the screen and focusing on something else other than the words that are coming from my
Experts
mouth.
would say, and the DAs, I think they're all required to use them now or something. I mean,
Yeah.
at least a lot of the trials, they're all using them for voir dire.
Sure.
Most of them are using for closing. And experts will say, you need to do that. People are visual. They need to see things. I tried it once, and I tried it in a voir dire, and it failed miserably. It's just not me.
You just straight oratory.
But I'm older than all of you at the table, and I think I may have just missed that. It's not, don't get me wrong, my wife will say that I live my life with this to my head, but the PowerPoint doesn't work for me. I have to literally be drilling into the eyes of the jurors on voir dire, on every step of the way, and I cannot have a distraction. I need them. I need them looking at me, even if it's.
But it's also a distraction for you too, right?
Sure.
Because you end up reading from your dang PowerPoint.
The biggest sin of PowerPoints is to have text on a PowerPoint and you're just uselessly parroting that text. Oh
Exactly.
my gosh, it's the bane of any student, any juror, anyone afflicted with a PowerPoint.
It's any reading throws you. So Meredith and I tried a case, and I think it was on the first trial or the second, or on one witness or another. But Meredith took a witness, and on one witness, she had all of her questions typed out, and she was reading them, and it just wasn't terribly effective. And before she got to the next witness, I took him out of the way, and I said, these, just ask it. It was similar questions. And she nailed it because she wasn't distracted with the reading and the getting out, et cetera. But, I think we're going more towards the PowerPoints, and you're going to especially have to do that in the years to come. But it's not, I don't think in my lifetime as a lawyer is going to happen for me. I'm not going to be able to adapt. But I think one day, like you said, kids are growing up. I mean, my kids, they don't really read. I mean, remember when we used to go to the law library? Did you have to go to the law library and pick out the Southwestern Reporters and Keysight? Or no, did you do Westlaw Online?
We were challenged to find it in a book, and it caused a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. No, everything is, like, if you've ever seen Better Call Saul, what are these books that people are looking in?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Westlaw or bust.
But you're closer to my generation.
I think I only graduated a year after you in law school.
I remember going and there was like a main book that had like all the topics, and you would look up like search and seizure,
like it sends you to another book,
and it sends you to another one, and you're photocopying these big heavy books on this.
Terrible.
That's what we did.
And people would hide the books.
People would hide the books.
People hid the books in law school
Yes.
because they didn't want you to find the case that helped you. I was like, oh my God.
But now,
it's terrible.
Now it's
all on your phone.
Everything's here.
Well, and if you take it away from your children, then they'll kill you.
Yeah, I mean.
Word of caution to you all.
Literally.
Literally.
No, they do. I mean,
man.
because like my son sits there and watches other kids playing video games and opening toys and playing with toys, and it's a bizarre deal.
But you read.
But it's not that bizarre when you think about it. And this is why I say you have to worry about the 30, 40, 50-year-old generation, because we sit here and we watch our kids and we watch them watching these videos and we're like, why is that entertaining? I mean, why do they want to watch other kids playing video games? Well, what do we as adults do? We watch people flipping houses and renovating houses. There's shows about people buying houses. We want to watch people freaking buying houses? Like, that's the kind of crap that the 30, 40, 50-year-olds. So they're doing the same thing.
Jimmy, I don't know what goes on in your house, but we watch.
You watch The Bachelor. You watch people
Real
giving people
Housewives
roses.
of New Jersey, which is real people, real drama. They have problems. They have children, and we learn from that. We don't watch little shows that are fluffy about houses and stuff.
No.
So
Real Housewives
don't
of New Jersey
lump me
is
into
Aesop's
your.
Fable 2019.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
please.
So funny.
I don't know what's going to happen, but
But we're all godforsaken. If Real Housewives of New Jersey is any indication of our jury pools,
can I
God
kind
help
of
us.
say on a serious note? I hope you're wrong, because
I do too.
things aren't. The consequences aren't going to get any less serious for these people facing crimes.
Right.
We're going to always have to have trials. We're always going to have good lawyers defending people and good fair prosecutors prosecuting and good judges overseeing them. I really hope, because the only thing that stands between these people and going to prison are these juries. And if we lose that and they're no longer neutral and fair and helpful, and we're screwed. Our system is screwed. It really is.
No, you're right. I mean, that's kind of the last.
I'm
last
optimistic.
backstop.
I'm optimistic.
Right.
You're not, but I am.
well, because what's the alternative? More bench trials?
Sorry. Excuse me.
I heard. I don't want to talk about it now, but I heard something. I don't go to the county courts very much anymore. I'm not down there.
I'll go to Daryl Jordan for a bench trial and Frank Labine any day of the week.
I heard something about someone going in and trying to get a bond somewhere, or trying to address a probable cause issue, and it blew up in their face or something. I don't know. I also have faith that these. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
I haven't
No.
heard it, no.
But we only have 30 seconds left, so we
Anyway,
may not have
I
a
have
chance to fully
faith
develop
that
this.
I have faith that these new judges, for the most part, are going to be great. I do.
I do too.
I do.
I have
a lot of them.
I have my faith.
A lot of them are going to be great.
Yeah, I think so.
Not as great as this was.
Oh,
This was
that's
amazing.
nice.
This was fun.
It's mainly because we had the two of y'all on,
Such a
and we had somebody quoting
So
literature
good.
actually.
such
Like we
fun
really raised
time.
we really raised the bar this
nice.
Were
week.
the phones unplugged?
No, I think everybody was just listening.
Yeah,
They were so enthralled.
riveted that they didn't want to. Yeah,
They were so enthralled with y'all's storytelling.
this was. This was.
This is great.
For Tony Starks and Meredith Morse, huh?
I'm glad you guys sobered up enough to get on the show.
Oh, burn! Gosh, we didn't even get to burn you yet, so you're gonna have to come back.
I know.
So
That's it.
You
We're
managed
gonna
to escape.
we're gonna have Morse of her.
More of Morse.
Have you ever had a guest that was as articulate though as Meredith? I mean, quoting East of
Steve,
Eden.
we don't even have hosts that are as articulate as her.
Hey.
So that's all the time we got for this week's episode, ladies and gentlemen. For our
They say
guest,
wrap
Meredith
now,
Morse.
so are we
That's
sending
right.
Steve out?
Yeah, exactly.
I won't do
For
it.
Meredith Morse, Steve Shellist, and my co-host Julio Vela. Good night, everybody.